With these Pro Minute video series, Dr. Klee will share some of his secrets with you on how to become a better flutist.
Hello, my name is Dr. David Klee, and welcome to another Pro Minute. Today we're going to talk about suggested methods for practicing scales and arpeggios. And this is geared more towards for the music educator and or music flute teacher. Scales. If you want to become a great musician, you cannot get around it. You have to pay your dues and you have to practice your scales. I'll never forget, I was fortunate enough, I studied with Warren Little when I was in college. He was the principal flutist of the Atlanta Symphony at the time, and I got to study with him. And I never forget how it worked with him with scales. I'd walk into his office, and it was a little teaching studio in the back of a music store in North Atlanta. And I would hear the metronome going. He always had it going at 120. And I'd come in, he'd ask me to quickly get my flute out and get going, and he'd say, "Okay, Mr. Klee, let's run down the scales here." And sure enough, I had to be able to play all my major scales, minor scales, and arpeggios, always to his little sacred metronome. And at first it about killed me because I wasn't used to something as rigorous as that. But over the months and the years, that's where I realized how much of a foundation it helped me. And so let me share with you a couple things that I've used over my last 30 years and what I used to teach with. There's two really great scale books out there. And the first one I use is called The Fabric of Flute Playing by Martha Rurig. That's actually was my first college flute teacher, Martha Rurig. Phenomenal teacher. And anyway, the scale book, what makes it unique, it does all the major scales, all three forms of the minor scales, diminished scales, and all the corresponding arpeggios and all inversions. And why is it a great book? Because it does it has a whole page of just the C scale. So it does the C scale C to C. Then it does the C scale starting on D. And then the C scale started on E. The C scale started on F, etc. all the way through all the notes of the scale. And you're thinking, well, why is that so important? Well, as we know, starting on a scale, you get it down where it's not hard. But what if you start on that same scale, but on the second or third or fourth scale degree, and you got to play the piece of music? All of a sudden it has a different feel to it. And particularly with the younger flutists, they can really put a bump in their technique because they're not used to that. And so what makes a scale book so unique that I like is that it's forcing you to practice all these scales starting on the different scale degrees of that scale. And of course you always do it with the metronome. And then the arpeggios are the same way. You have major, you have minor, you have diminished, and you have augmented. And then later in the book it even goes up to the 7th. Later in my jazz studies, I even had to go through the 9th, 11th, and 13th. So the whole point again, by doing all these different inversions, you see, it really covers a gamut of all the things you're going to see scale-wise and all the things you're going to see as far as arpeggios. Another really, truly great book is a book out there by Marcel, Louise called Daily Exercises for the Flute. It's a wonderful book. It's a little more advanced book, but it really covers well. It actually, what makes it work well, it actually covers it in different intervals. So it's really a great book. I would always practice scales with a metronome. If your student that you're working with can't play them to a metronome, chances are they're never going slow enough. I've had them go at 60 beats to the quarter note. Da, da. The whole point is they have to learn how to follow the metronome. And if they do it once or twice and quit, well, that's not going to happen. They've got to stick with it. So you find a tempo, you get where they can play these things at a tempo, and then gradually, slowly, but surely you work them up to eventually get them up to 120. I have 6th and 7th grade flute students. I've started in the 5th grade. And by the 6th or 7th grade, I've got them in the Fabric of Flute Playing. I've got them in there. And what we do, I take them through the book the first time just to learn the scales. Just to learn. And then the second time, I get them through the book at some kind of tempo. And then we go through the book a third time, and then we start cranking up the tempo. And by then, this is from the 7th, 8th, 9th grade, and usually by the 9th or 10th grade, I've got them up to 120, 126. So it takes them a couple years. But then what happens, they develop this rock solid technique. And it's just It's just incredible. Now, as you work on these scales and arpeggios, make sure you don't blow harder in the high range. We're not a trumpet. We don't have to do that. A flutist, you use your embouchure. You should be able, in fact, you can even play your scale starting fortissimo. When you get to the top note, pianissimo. When you go down, go fortissimo again. That's a great way to practice scales. It forces you to use the embouchure and not the air, not by blowing harder. It's just a great way. Again, I mentioned earlier about the Marcel Louise book. What makes that a great book is that he'll do like scales in thirds. La da 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 da, and then fourth, da da da, and then fifths, diminished sixth, seventh, minor seventh, major seventh. It's just a great book. It's not for the faint of heart. But you know, usually by high school, my advanced students are usually ready for that second book. And I'll take them through that, the Marcel book. So it's just a really great thing. So in review, I would get these scale books to where you eventually can get through the scales and the arpeggios. And then you start working at a tempo of some kind. And then you gradually, over the days, weeks, months, and years, you work that tempo up. It doesn't happen overnight, but it will happen. And eventually in time, man, you could whittle these scales out 126. And what Warren Little told me, why was 126 such an important tempo? He said if it's under 120, a lot of times the fingers can hide some of the problems that you're having in the scales. You know, the way we're made, some fingers rush, some finger drags. That's just the way we're made. Over time, though, you can train the weak fingers to be stronger, and the stronger fingers are kind of relaxed and not pull the fingers, so to speak, as far as the notes. He said when you get over 126, it's just the opposite way. Again, you're not hearing all the problems that you might have. He said around 120, 126, you really hear the problems. So he said that's a really neat tempo to work towards. And that way, eventually, you can work out all the bugs. So, you know, begin the scales, begin the arpeggios, work on a tempo. Eventually you get up to that tempo, and I think you'll be well on your way. So this is a really neat technique to work with your students over time. And I think you'll find that it will really help them in their literature. This is Dr. David Klee. Thank you.